My son kicked me out the same day I lost my job, but he had no clue I was worth millions. I'm Margaret Turner, a 71-year-old woman who spent 3 long decades believing that love, sacrifice, and quiet endurance would eventually be enough to hold a family together. I worked my fingers numb in houses that weren't mine, saved every extra dollar, walked to bus stops in snowstorms, nursed a child through sickness, and built a life from nothing but grit. For years I told myself that doing everything for my boy Elias would mean I'd never grow old alone. I thought I was shaping security for both of us. I thought effort guaranteed affection. I thought loyalty created loyalty. I was wrong on all counts. The afternoon everything broke apart. I'd just come home from my final shift as a live-in housekeeper for the Whitmore family, one of the wealthiest households in Cincinnati. My employer, Ms. Catherine Whitmore, had passed away a week earlier, and though grief still clung to me, I felt strangely hopeful walking up my son's driveway. I had given 30 years of my life to that estate, and in those 30 years Ms. Whitmore had treated me with more dignity than most people ever had. I learned to cook under real chefs, to maintain antiques worth more than my yearly earnings, to read music sitting beside her grand piano. She once told me, "Margaret, you carry yourself with more grace than anyone I know." It was the first sincere compliment I'd received in decades. I didn't know then that she had also written my name into her will. I didn't know the full weight of what she left behind, over $8 million, but I knew she valued me. So when I walked into Elias's house that evening, carrying the news that my service with the Whitmores had ended, I imagined my son would at least offer a chair, a glass of water, or a moment of comfort. Instead, before I even stepped fully inside, he looked up from his kitchen island, frowned like I'd interrupted something important, and asked, "Why are you home early?" "I'm not working there anymore," I said softly, trying to steady my voice.
Catherine is gone.
They don't need household staff now. That should have been a moment of quiet grief, an employer of many years passing, a job ending, a chapter closing. But grief wasn't what crossed my son's face.
Irritation was.
Then anger. Then something uglier, something I still struggle to name. He slammed his hands on the counter. "So you just quit?
Just like that?"
Where exactly do you think money grows from, Mom? I froze. I had assumed he would ask how I was holding up, maybe express sympathy. Instead, he looked at me like I'd sabotaged his life by daring to grow old. "I didn't quit," I whispered. "The family is settling her estate. They told me to take time." "You can't take time," he snapped. "We have bills, Mom. You know Nora's planning to start fertility treatments. You know our mortgage is increasing. You know we rely on your paycheck." There it was. Not one question about my well-being. Not one thought about my age. Not 1 ounce of humanity.
Just the bottomless need for what I earned.
Nora swept in from the dining room like a cold breeze wearing perfume. She folded her arms with the poise of someone raised to believe other people existed for her convenience. Her mother, Lydia, followed behind, chin high, eyes narrowed, evaluating me like an unwanted object sitting in the way. "So," Nora said, "you're unemployed now."
"That is inconvenient."
She said it as if I had done it deliberately to cause her trouble. I tried to explain, tried to say I came home early because I thought maybe Maybai could help around the house when she became pregnant. I told her I was strong enough to assist through her first trimester, maybe even afterward. I told them motherhood was overwhelming and that I wanted to lighten her burden. But the look she gave me could have iced over a lake. "You were a housekeeper," she said. "Not a maternity nurse." Her mother chimed in, "And babies need professionals.
Actual training.
Not someone who learned everything on the job." I should have felt insulted, but instead I just felt numb, hollow in a way I hadn't felt since my early widowhood. I had spent years trying to earn these people's approval, letting them mold me into whatever version of myself made their lives easier. I swallowed every insult, every dismissive glance, every time Nora introduced me as my husband's aging mother who helps us out. But that night something cracked inside me so sharply I felt it in my bones. Still, I tried to stay calm. "If you don't need my help," I murmured, "I can step back." Lydia rolled her eyes, as if I had finally said something reasonable. "Good. But you can still contribute financially. A nanny and night nurse will be expensive. You'll cover that." A sick, tight ache spread across my chest. Eliasmi's son, the boy I held through fevers, the child I once carried on my hip through rainstorms, nodded as if that were obvious. "It's only fair, Mom. Since you decided to stop working, you need to make up for it somehow. You can't expect to live here for free."
Live here for free.
I paid for half of that house. My name wasn't on the deed, but my years were. My back was. My hands.
My lost sleep. My bent spine.
My entire youth. I stood there trembling, realizing that everything I'd worked for had been rewritten in their minds. To them, I wasn't a mother. I wasn't family. I wasn't even a person. I was a wallet with legs. I think I whispered, voice barely audible, "I think at my age I should be retired."
Nora laughed out loud.
"Retired?
With what money?"
You don't even have a pension." I swallowed hard. My pension savings had been used on their down payment years earlier, at their insistence. "It's temporary," Elias cut in. "You're still healthy. You can work another 20 years. You always say you want to contribute.
Now is your chance. Another 20 years.
The words hit with the force of a collapsing building. I stared at my son, searching for the little boy who once cried if I disappeared from the room. I searched for the child who used to press his cheek to my hand.
I searched for the boy who used to whisper, "Mom, don't ever leave me."
But I couldn't find him. Instead, I saw a man shaped entirely by entitlement and resentment. A man who blamed me for every hardship he ever faced, even ones I had shielded him from. A man who believed compassion was currency I owed him forever.
A man who thought motherhood meant endless servitude.
When I said again that I was done working, Lydia stepped forward with a chillingly smooth smile. "There's a senior residence nearby. If you insist on being unemployed, at least work in their kitchen to earn your keep. They offer room and board."
"It is perfect for someone like you."
Nora nodded approvingly. "Yes. That makes sense. You don't need much." Finally, I turned to Elias, my voice breaking. "You want to send me to an assisted living facility to mop floors?" He hesitated, but only for a second. "It's practical, Mom. You'll get stability. We will too.
Nobody owes anyone anything.
Isn't that what you always say?" That was when something inside me went quiet, deadly quiet. My son grabbed his phone and began dialing the facility right in front of me, arranging my placement like he was scheduling a furniture pickup. "Elias," I choked out, tears spilling before I could stop them, "after everything I've given you, everything, this is how you repay me?" He shoved my suitcase toward the door with his foot. "You ruined my life when you left Dad. You owe me for that alone."
My heart cracked open.
The painful truth I'd hidden for 30 years surged upward, desperate to escape.
"You don't understand anything," I whispered.
"You don't know what I sacrificed to keep you." He didn't want to hear it.
He never wanted the truth.
He only wanted someone to blame. But in that moment, standing in his kitchen, clutching the handle of a battered suitcase, surrounded by people who wished I were gone, I finally understood the truth myself. They had never loved me. They only loved what I provided. What they didn't know, what none of them had ever bothered to ask, was that I was no longer the poor woman they assumed me to be. My late employer had left me a fortune. And now that I had nothing left to lose, I was finally ready to use it. When I walked out of Elias's house that night, clutching the handle of my old suitcase, the Ohio winter wind cut across my cheeks like it had been waiting years to do so. I didn't know where I was going, just that I could no longer stay in a place where my existence felt like an invoice they wished they could void. I walked until my legs trembled, until the porch lights of his neatly trimmed suburban neighborhood blurred into streaks. Every step felt like tearing loose roots that had been planted too deep and for too long. At the bus stop, an elderly man in a worn parka nodded at me. I nodded back, swallowing the hot sting of tears. I had spent decades fighting to shield Elias from hardship, but as I stood under the flickering lamp waiting for a bus that seemed too slow for the urgency inside me, I realized the hardest fight would be saving myself from the pain he'd become. When the bus finally arrived, I climbed aboard with stiff fingers, sat by the window, and pressed my forehead to the glass. The night outside was quiet, but my mind roared with everything I'd swallowed for years: the insults, the manipulation, the way Elias and Nora spoke about me as if I were a defective appliance they were tired of repairing. It was then, in that rattling bus heading downtown, that I accepted the truth. My son saw me not as a mother, not as a human being, but as a resource. A renewable income stream. A permanent laborer they believed they rightfully owned. The realization was so sharp I felt physically ill. When I reached the city center, I used a little of what I had left in my old checking account to book a room at a mid-range business hotel. I stood at the counter with my suitcase, trembling, while the receptionist kindly, a young woman with freckles, gave me a careful once-over. Her expression softened, maybe imagining I had nowhere else to go. She handed me a keycard and said, "If you need extra blankets, just call down." A simple act of kindness broke something open inside me, and when I reached my room on the 6th floor, I sat on the edge of the bed and cried until my chest hurt. Years and years of being unappreciated by Elias, by Nora, by Lydia poured out of me. I felt centuries old. Useless. Abandoned.
But under all that pain, something else stirred: a heat, a pulse, a spark.
Anger at myself, more than at them, for obeying every demand, sacrificing every dream, refusing to acknowledge the truth about how they treated me. When I finally lifted my head, my eyes landed on my phone. I had one call to make. I dialed Mr. Winslow, the private attorney who had handled Ms.
Whitmore's estate.
He answered with gentle warmth, as he always had.
"Mrs. Turner? Are you all right?
It's late." "No," I said.
"I am not all right.
But I think it's time to proceed." He didn't need me to explain. The trust Catherine had left in my name, $8 million in assets, investments, and property, could now be formally transferred. Until that night, I'd hesitated. I didn't want money to change me. I didn't want Elias to know. I didn't want to think about the future alone. Now I saw that I had been alone all along. "We'll finalize everything this week," he told me.
"You re-protected now.
Whatever you decide to do next, you won't do it from a place of desperation." After the call, I slept for the first time in days, not well, but without interruption. In the morning, I opened the blinds. The sun rose over the skyline like a reminder that the world kept turning whether my son wanted me or not. I made myself a cup of instant coffee with the hotel machine, sat on the small sofa, and pulled out a notebook I'd carried for years but never used. I wrote one line.
"I deserve to live without fear."
Then I turned to the next page and began a new list: practical steps, firm decisions, long overdue boundaries. And at the top,
1.
Find a home that is mine, not theirs. Not the house where I was treated like an unwelcome tenant. Not a place they could control.
Not a spare room I borrowed out of guilt. A home where every piece of furniture, every glass, every breath belonged to me.
That afternoon, I dressed in my cleanest clothes and took a rideshare to the most prestigious real estate showroom in the city, a glittering glass building that seemed worlds away from the life Elias assumed I would always have. As I stepped through the doors, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I had spent decades entering back doors, service entrances, kitchens. Walking through the front of a luxury establishment felt almost rebellious. The receptionist greeted me politely, though her eyes dipped over my thrift store coat and the scuffed leather on my shoes. "Are you here for the open showcase?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to view available properties." She gestured toward the model home area. "One of our associates will assist you shortly." A young woman named Monica, barely in her 20s, approached with a shy smile. She didn't look me up and down, didn't judge, didn't hesitate. "I'd be happy to show you around," she said warmly. "We have some incredible listings today." Her voice steadied me. I followed her deeper into the showroom, past scale models of sprawling villas and glossy posters for gated communities. People around us whispered, some glancing my way with subtle doubt. I ignored Thema, tried to. But doubt has a way of finding you. Just as we reached the largest display, a sharp voice cut across the room. "Are we letting anyone walk in today?" I didn't have to turn to know who it was. Standing there with a folder in hand and a sneer already forming on her lips was Chloe, Nora's cousin. She recognized me instantly and crossed her arms. "What are you doing here, Margaret?" she demanded. "This isn't a thrift shop." "I'm here to view a property," I answered calmly. She laughed loudly enough for nearby buyers to hear. "A property? Here? Don't joke. These villas start at over $1 million." "I'm aware," I said. "No, you're not," she snapped. "Because if you were, you wouldn't embarrass yourself like this." Monica stepped in quickly, trying to defuse the tension. "Chloe, I'm showing this client around. You're not scheduled." "I don't care," Chloe interrupted, shoving Monica aside. "Security should escort her out. We don't have to entertain fantasies." Two guards hesitated on the edge of the room, uncertain. I felt humiliation rise like heat under my skin, but beneath that, a steadier fire burned. I turned to Chloe, met her eyes, and without a word, pulled out my phone. With a practiced tap, I opened my banking app and held it up for everyone to see. For a moment, silence swallowed the showroom. Then a gasp. Then another. $8 million. Chloe's face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again as if trying to find a justification for treating me like garbage. That can't be real," she stammered. "It has to be fake."
"You a housekeeper."
"Was," I corrected softly. "Not anymore." Her expression twisted, desperate. "She's lying. She's using someone else's money." But nobody was listening to her anymore. Monica stepped closer to me, brimming with disbelief and awe. "Ma'am, which property would you like to see first?" "All of them," I said. "I'm buying today." And Chloe, who once smirked while treating me like nothing, could only stand there trembling while the entire showroom turned to follow me instead of her. It wasn't just a tour. It was the first step into a life that finally belonged to me. Monica guided me toward the largest villa model in the center of the showroom. The scale display alone was breathtaking: floor-to-ceiling windows, a wraparound porch, a private garden, and a sunroom bathed in natural light. It looked like something I would have cleaned for other people in my younger years, never lived in myself. Yet for the first time in my entire life, I allowed myself to imagine stepping inside as the owner, not the help. But of course, the moment I began to picture it, Chloe came storming back into my orbit like a wasp that refused to die. She marched toward us, her heels striking the floor like angry punctuation marks. "Alex!" she shouted toward the back of the showroom.
"Get over here. Now."
A tall man in a crisp shirt, clearly the sales manager, hurried over. "What's going on?" he asked, keeping his tone professional. "This woman," Chloe said, jabbing a manicured finger at me, "is pretending to be a buyer. She's here for free coffee and air conditioning. She has no business in a luxury showcase." Alex looked uncertain, but tried to remain polite. "Ma'am, do you have verification of purchasing ability? We require it for villa showings." I handed him the folder I'd submitted at the entrance, proof of identity and financial certification. It was standard for high-end viewings. But before Alex could even open it, Chloe snatched it out of his hands and flipped it open dramatically. Her eyes skimmed the page and her face twisted. $5 million liquid funds," she said loudly, practically shouting. "You expect us to believe this?"
"She mops floors for a living. This is fake."
I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly reached again for my phone, opened my banking app, and held it up close enough for Alex and the surrounding guests to see. The number glowed across the screen: $8,203,374.82. Gasps rippled outward. Whispers followed. "That's her account?"
"She's got over 8 million.
Maybe she's actually buying." Chloe looks like she swallowed a lemon. Monica's eyes widened so far I wondered if they might spill tears. For a moment, it felt like she was more excited than I was. She turned to me, beaming. "Ma'am, would you like a tour of our furnished unit? It's stunning." "Yes," I said.
"Let's do that."
But Chloe wasn't done humiliating herself. "She's scamming you," she shrilled. "People like this, women her age, they latch onto rich men, they pretend to be caretakers."
Alex's expression darkened.
"Chloe, enough." But she kept going, voice rising in ugly desperation. "Everyone in my family knows her.
She's a nobody. Alive in might. Don't let her trick you."
That kind of balance isn't real, it's probably her employer's money." I stepped forward slowly so that I stood directly in front of her. My voice was calm but cold as Ohio ice. "You think I would pretend to afford a home?" I asked softly, "after working my whole life cleaning homes for people who thought I was invisible?" She opened her mouth but nothing came out. Her silence was more satisfying than any insult I could have returned. Alex inhaled sharply, instantly shifting back into manager mode. "Ma'am," he said to me, "on behalf of the company, I sincerely apologize. Please allow us to assign our most experienced team to assist you." I shook my head and pointed gently to Monica. "She's experienced enough for me." Monica blinked, stunned. "Are you sure?" "I mean, I can, of course, but I'm still in training." "You treated me with respect the moment I walked in," I said. "That's more than I can say for others." Her face lit up with gratitude, and she straightened her shoulders like someone suddenly aware of her own worth. We moved toward the private showing rooms, passing a set of large glass doors that opened into a meticulously staged villa interior. Soft lighting spilled across pristine marble floors. The scent of cedar and linen filled the room. Everything sparkled, every countertop, every polished brass handle, every windowpane kissed by sunlight. "I want you to imagine your life here," Monica said quietly.
"Because you deserve it."
I stood in the doorway for a long moment, letting her words settle in my chest like a bomb.
"You deserve it.
Simple.
Kind.
True. And for once, I believed it. We toured the open-concept kitchen, with a 6-burner stove gleaming like a crown jewel. The living room featured vaulted ceilings, built-in shelving, a gas fireplace with white stone facade. A wide staircase led to the master suite, bigger than any space I had ever personally occupied. The walk-in closet alone felt like a small apartment. When we reached the sunroom, I froze. The light pouring in through the panoramic windows looked like something out of a painting. It reminded me of afternoons Catherine and I spent reading poetry together, sunlight drifting across the floor like golden fabric. She always said I had an artist's heart. I never believed her until that moment. "This room," I whispered, "feels like peace." Monica nodded with a soft smile.
Most buyers say that.
It's our most requested unit. Without blinking, without questioning myself, I said, "I'll take it." She nearly dropped her tablet.
"Ma'am, you haven't even seen the others."
"I don't need to," I replied. "This one is enough." Then let's get the paperwork started," she stammered, glowing with joy. We walked back to the signing area. The moment my pen touched the contract, a low hum filled the room, voices whispering, a few gasping at the final price I paid without financing, without hesitation. The number on the contract meant nothing compared to what it represented. Freedom. Rest. Dignity. A new life. But the moment the final signature dried, Chloe's voice slithered into the air like cold fog. "You all shouldn't be impressed," she said loudly, addressing the crowd. "She's been a live-in servant for wealthy old men for decades. You know what that usually means." The room stiffened.
Monica's face fell.
Alex looked ready to fire her on the spot. But I raised one hand calmly. "Not yet," I told him. "Let her speak. I want the whole room to hear."
Chloe smirked, mistaking my calm for weakness.
"She earned that money in ways you wouldn't want to know," she said. "She seduced some old millionaire. That's the only explanation. Do you really think a maid could make millions?"
"Don't be naive."
The jealousy in her voice dripped so heavily it could have stained the marble floor. I straightened, lifted my chin, and said clearly, "My son told me a rumor once, Chloe. He said you only close deals because you sleep with clients to earn your commissions. Should we call him and verify that?" Her face shattered. Her lips trembled. That's that she didn't know. Alex stepped forward like a judge delivering a verdict. "Chloe, you are terminated effective immediately."
Securities escort her out.
She broke. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she backed away from me in disbelief. Security led her toward the exit while she shouted, "It's not fair."
"I'm telling the truth. You people don't understand, she is nothing."
But nobody listened. For the first time in decades, nobody listened to the lies told about me. After Chloe was gone, the room exhaled as though a storm had passed. Monica turned to me with emotion brimming in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You defended me even when I couldn't defend myself." I reached out and touched her hand gently. "No one deserves to be talked down to. Not you. Not me. Not anyone." She swallowed hard and nodded, grateful beyond words. When the sales manager returned with the second set of documents for my additional investment property, I smiled and said, "Let's make this one official too."
A murmur of awe swept the room. 2 villas in a single afternoon.
I signed again. Another home.
Another symbol of my freedom.
After the contracts were finalized, Monica insisted on personally arranging deep cleaning, move-in preparation, utilities activation, everything. She handled it with such genuine care that I felt something warm settle inside my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. Being valued simply for being human. That evening, when I left the showroom and stepped into the cool evening air, the sky was painted in streaks of pale pink and violet. I stopped on the sidewalk and closed my eyes. For the first time since walking out of Elias's house, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel like a burden. I felt powerful. And I knew deep in my bones that the real storm had only begun. Because the moment Elias learned what I had done, what I now owned, he would come clawing back. But this time, I would be ready. The morning after I purchased the 2 villas, I woke in my hotel room feeling something I hadn't felt in decades: quiet. Not silence, but quiet. The kind that settles into the bones like warm sunlight after a brutal winter storm. I lay there for several minutes simply breathing, letting the reality settle. I had a home.
A place where no one could throw me out. A place where my name meant ownership, not inconvenience.
A place where I didn't exist to serve someone else's comfort. But peace, I would soon learn, can be a fragile thing. 3 days later, after finalizing some paperwork with my attorney, I wandered into a piano showroom on a whim. Music had always been a sanctuary for mesomething. Catherine Whitmore taught me over the years as gently as if she were teaching a child to hold sunlight. She would sit beside me in her music room, guiding my hands across ivory keys, telling me that art was the sigh of the soul. I never had talent, but I had devotion. And Catherine always said that mattered more. So when I stepped into that showroom, with its polished floors and rows of gleaming pianos resting like sleeping giants, I felt an unexpected peace. A young store clerk greeted me, noticing the way my fingers brushed a glossy Steinway. She offered me a sheet of music and an encouraging smile.
Feel free to play anything you like.
I sat down at the bench, took a slow breath, and began Moonlight Sonata. The first note trembled nerves, maybe, but as the melody flowed, something inside me loosened. All the years of pain, humiliation, sacrifice, all the nights I went to bed exhausted, all the times I bit my tongue to avoid conflict, all the invisible bruises Elias and Nora inflicted, everything seemed to lift from my shoulders, one aching, beautiful note at a time. The piano filled the air like dawn breaking. Then the store's glass door opened, and in swept a gale of sharp perfume and sharper voices. Susan, Nora's mother, and her entourage of perfectly groomed friends. The sound of their heels clicking against the tile was somehow louder than the music. They moved as a flock, expensive coats, expensive hair, expensive contempt. They noticed me instantly. What store lets just anyone touch a piano worth more than her annual salary? One woman said loudly enough for the employees to hear. Another leaned close to Susan and whispered, "Is that the mother-in-law you mentioned?"
The one who freeloaded for years.
Susan smirked with satisfaction.
Yes.
And apparently she thinks she can just play around on these instruments. God knows where her hands have been.
My fingers faltered, but I did stop playing.
I had learned long ago that pain is easiest to endure when you refuse to let it interrupt your rhythm. I finished the movement, letting the last note hang in the air. The young clerk began clapping softly, her admiration genuine. "That was beautiful," she said.
"Truly."
Susan rolled her eyes.
"Please."
If she had actual talent, she wouldn't be a maid. Her friends snickered. The bun-haired woman, always the loudest, walked closer, scrutinizing my old handbag with theatrical disgust. "Is that from a thrift store? Or a yard sale?" I had endured worse in my lifetime, but that day, I was no longer the woman who shrank beneath a daughter-in-law's shadow. I no longer lived in a house where my worth was measured in chores completed. I no longer depended on anyone. So instead of shrinking, I stood. And the entire room seemed to shift with me. "I'm planning to buy one of these pianos today," I said calmly, meeting their eyes without flinching. Laughter burst from Susan's group. The bun-haired woman coughed out a wheezing snort.
"Buy?
With what?
Loyalty points?
Coupons." Susan tilted her head with the practiced disdain of someone who had spent her whole life stepping on people like me. Margaret, she said sweetly, don't embarrass yourself. These cost over $100,000. I simply turned to the clerk. How much for this model? $155,000, she replied gently. Perfect, I said. I'll take it.
The room froze.
Susan's face twitched as if the world had suddenly tilted and she didn't know how to stand straight anymore. You're lying, she said, voice sharp with panic masquerading as superiority. I opened my banking app and displayed the balance. Over $8 million. Her jaw went slack. Her friends gasped as if someone had slapped them across the face with a velvet glove soaked in truth. The bun-haired woman nearly tripped over her own feet backing away. The clerk quickly retrieved the paperwork, her hands trembling with excitement rather than fear. I signed every document calmly, savoring each stroke of the pen not because of the money, but because of what it represented: survival, independence, the reclamation of my dignity. And of course, the moment I finished signing, Susan broke.
Her voice cracked like thin ice.
Where did you get that money? Did you scam someone? Did you rob someone?
Tell the truth.
I earned every dollar legally, I replied, and I owe you no explanation. Her face flushed an angry red. Elias told me you were unstable, Margaret, but this is unhinged. You abandon him, you ruin his marriage, and now you strut around buying villas and pianos like some delusional old woman. You mean, I said softly, the marriage where you and Nora forced me to keep working until I was 80? The marriage where you told me to move into a senior facility and scrub floors because I wasn't producing enough income for your taste. Her eyes widened not because she felt guilt, but because she realized I wasn't afraid anymore.
You retwisting things. She spat.
I have recordings, I said. The color drained from her face. Her friends shifted uncomfortably. The bun-haired woman, who earlier accused me of pretending, now edged behind Susan as if the floor had grown too hot under her feet. And then another woman, one I hadn't noticed before, younger, with trembling hands, suddenly snapped. She rushed toward me, shouting, "You're a scammer. People like you steal money from hard-working families. I lost $100,000 to someone like you." The employees stepped in, trying to restrain her. Moments later, 2 police officers walked through the door, the same officers who had helped me when Chloe slandered me at the showroom. One recognized me instantly. "Ma'am," he said kindly, "seems like trouble finds you these days." "It's not trouble," I corrected.
It's people who can stand the truth.
The officers questioned the screaming woman who had no evidence of anything and then issued a warning about false accusations. The room calmed, though the air still vibrated with tension. Finally, Susan regained enough voice to speak. "You're unbelievable," she whispered.
You turn your back on your own son the minute you get money.
You think wealth makes you better than us. No, I said, looking her directly in the eyes. Wealth didn't change me. It revealed you. She inhaled sharply as if I had struck her. Then she snarled, "Elias will never forgive you for this." "He doesn't have to," I said. "I no longer live my life waiting for his forgiveness or his approval." She stormed out, her entourage scrambling behind her like startled chickens fleeing from truth. I watched them go, feeling neither triumph nor bitterness, just relief. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one walking away in shame. They were. I stayed in that showroom a while longer, running my fingers along the polished surface of the piano that now belonged to me. The clerk offered to schedule delivery. I thanked her, and as I left the store, sunlight poured through the front windows like a blessing.
Nobody shoved me out.
Nobody belittled me. Nobody told me what I owed.
I walked through the city carrying one simple truth.
I was no longer the woman who people could silence. I was no longer the mother who bowed to ungrateful hands. I was finally becoming someone who lived for herself. But deep down, I already sensed what was coming. Because people like Susan never disappear quietly. And sons like Elias never give up when money is involved. When I left the piano showroom and stepped into the cool Cincinnati air, I thought foolishly that the worst chapters of my life had finally been tucked away behind me like old pages in a diary. I had a home. I had peace. I had finally, irrevocably, cut myself free from the hands that had used me for decades. But as I walked down the sunlit sidewalk with the receipt for a $150,000 piano tucked into my bag, I felt a faint tremor in the air, like pressure building before a tornado. I had underestimated something very dangerous. A desperate man who thinks he's losing his lifeline will burn the whole world down before he accepts it. And in my son Elias's mind, I wasn't his mother anymore. I was a severed financial umbilical cord he was determined to reattach by force, if necessary. The storm began with something deceptively gentle. A delivery man showed up at the gated entrance of my new villa carrying an enormous bouquet, dozens of red roses so large and fragrant they looked stolen from a wedding aisle. The guard at the gate rang my intercom and said, "Ma'am, there's a delivery for you from someone who claims to be your son." I told him to bring it to the doorstep, curiosity overriding caution. When I opened the card tucked inside the flowers, the words almost made me laugh.
Wishing you a wonderful weekend.
Love, Elias.
Love.
A word he had never used for minute even when he was little. The bouquet was so heavy it required both hands to lift, but I carried it to the kitchen trash can, dropped the entire arrangement inside, snapped a photo of the crumpled roses, and sent it to the guard with one note. Kindly refuse everything from this person going forward. That should have been the end of it. But guilt and greed make a toxic cocktail. Over the next several days, every time I left the villa in the car with my newly hired driver, I saw Elias waiting outside the gate.
Rain.
Snow. Cold winds.
Dawn.
Dusk. He stood there with the stubbornness of a child banging on a locked candy store door. Sometimes Nora's expensive SUV was parked a block away. She never stepped out, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. Fix this. Apologize. Get her back under control. One afternoon, my driver slowed as we approached the gate, and through the tinted glass I saw Elias drop to his knees on the sidewalk, right in front of the security booth. His voice cracked theatrically. "Mom. Please.
Please talk to me.
I'm your son. Mom, I'm sorry." His theatrics reminded me of a man auditioning for a movie role. His tears were loud but dry. His voice trembled in all the practiced places. A performance crafted to manipulate a weaker version of me own that no longer existed.
I instructed the driver, "Keep moving."
We drove past him without stopping. I didn't even turn my head. For 2 straight weeks, he repeated this spectacle. When he finally stopped appearing at the gate, I allowed myself to breathe until I realized he had simply shifted methods. And this time, his weapon wasn't guilt. It was the internet. The first hint arrived in the form of whispers. Women in the villa community glanced my way longer than usual.
The barista at the boutique cafe near the lake gave me a nervous half-smile.
Even the concierge at the community clubhouse seemed hesitant, as if he weren't sure whether to greet me warmly or keep a cautious distance. Then Monica dear, brave Monica called me one afternoon, her voice trembling. "Mrs.
Turner, please don't let the things online upset you."
Online? My heart dropped so hard I felt it in my knees. "What things?" I asked. There was a long pause before she answered. "Your son. He's been live streaming. Every day." I didn't want to look. But I had to. I opened the streaming platform she mentioned and there he was. Elias, sitting in a dimly lit room, looking unshaven and pitiful, with a sadness painted so convincingly across his face that a stranger might have reached through the screen to comfort him. His channel title read,
How My Mother Abandoned Me.
He spoke with the soft, trembling voice of a man who had lost everything. My mom left me, he said to thousands of viewers. Thousands. She cut me off completely. She doesn't want me in her life now that she's rich. I begged her to come home. I kneeled outside her house. She wouldn't even look at me. He sniffled for dramatic effect. The year I got into college, she left to be a servant for rich people. I lived alone in a tiny apartment. She never helped. She didn't even volunteer to help when my wife got pregnant. And now she blocks my number and pretends I'm dead. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles whitened. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a plea for reconciliation. This was a calculated strategy. And it was working. The comments flooding the screen were vile.
She sounds like a monster.
How could a mother choose money over her own child?
Bro, we here for you.
Stay strong. I wish I had a mom. She doesn't deserve a son like you. Is she mentally unstable? Should someone check on her? Go after her legally. She abandoned him?
In America? That's unforgivable.
Unforgivable. The word slammed into my chest like a blow. He didn't stop there. He posted short videos of himself crying in his car, narrating stories of childhood neglect, claiming Nora was emotionally exhausted from dealing with my mother's cruelty, insinuating that I was unstable, selfish, mentally declining. People ate it up like candy. He gained followers hundreds, then thousands. He accepted pity donations and sponsorships. He sold merchandise with slogans like abandoned but strong. My name was becoming associated with cruelty, greed, and neglect. Even worse, internet detectives began digging. Someone posted a blurry photo of me entering my villa. Someone else found old public records from when I rented apartments decades ago. A few users speculated wildly. She must have a sugar daddy. Elder fraud is real. Someone should investigate her. Where did she get the money? Looks like she's hiding something. When I scrolled through the comments, I felt as though I'd been dropped into a nightmare version of my own life, one where I was the villain in my son's imaginary movie about suffering. I tried to close the app, but my fingers shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. In that moment, the pain wasn't about reputation. It was betrayal, the kind that cuts deeper than any insult. The kind only someone you raised, fed, nursed, protected, and loved could ever inflict. Someone who once clung to my neck as a sickly infant. Someone I would have died for. Someone who now used my face as the cover of a tragedy he wrote for profit. But I hadn't survived this long just to be slandered into silence. So that night, I sat at my kitchen counter beneath the warm glow of my new villa's pendant lights, poured myself a small glass of Merlot, opened my laptop, and typed, "Create account.
Username. The Motor hervorgeht to mention.
Go live." If he wanted a public stage, I would meet him under the same lights. But unlike Elias, I had 3 things he never did.
The truth. Receipts. And nothing left to lose.
The night I created my livestream account, the villa was wrapped in a stillness so complete it felt like even the walls were holding their breath. I sat at my kitchen island, the marble still smooth and unfamiliar beneath my palms, and opened my laptop. For a moment, I saw my reflection on the dark screen, an old woman with silver hair, eyes too tired for her age, shoulders that had carried too many burdens for too many years. If I let the world define me through Elias's lies, then this reflection would become the truth people believed. I refused to let that happen.
I clicked go live.
At first, only a handful of viewers trickled in, curious people drifting in from Elias's channel. My username, the mother he forgot to mention, must have jolted interest. Comments flew in immediately. Is that really the mom? She looks cold, I can see why he's hurting.
Lady, why do you abandon your kid?
Tell your side then. Their hostility settled in my stomach, but I kept my voice steady. Good evening, I began. My son has been live streaming about me for weeks. He's told you I abandoned him. That I chose money over family. That I left him to suffer alone. I will not shout. I will not insult him.
I will only show you the truth.
The chat exploded, some mocking, some curious, some demanding proof. So I gave them proof. I reached beside me and lifted the leather-bound folder that Mr. Winslow, my attorney, had given me when Ms. Whitmore's estate was finalized. I held up the notarized trust papers, Catherine's signature beside mine, the official seal gleaming under the lamp. This, I said, is where the money came from. Not from scams. Not from manipulation. From a woman I served faithfully for 30 years. She left it to me because she had no children and believed I deserved peace in my later years. I displayed the inheritance letter on screen. Some comments softened. Others doubled down. He probably didn't know. So what? A mom shouldn't cut off her kid.
She is hiding something.
He said she never helped him. Then came the message that made my jaw tighten. Where were you when he was in college? He said you abandoned him then too. So I reached again into the folder and pulled out a stack of old receipts, tuition bills, medication invoices, pediatric specialist fees, hospital records, pages upon pages documenting the endless battle to keep Elias alive when he was young. You want to know where I was when he was in college? I asked quietly. I was in another city, working 3 jobs. To pay for this. I held the receipts closer to the camera. $3,450 for pediatric cardiology. $17,290 for emergency surgery. $800 for prescription heart medication. $5,200 for specialist consultations. Then I spoke words I had never spoken publicly. My son was not my biological child. The chat froze for a solid second before detonating. What? She lied to him? Explain yourself now. He never mentioned that.
Why is she serious?
I opened the adoption certificate, carefully lifting it so the viewers could see the official stamp and the date over 4 decades ago. I adopted Elias when he was 1 year old, I said. He had been abandoned in a dumpster by his birth parents. He had a severe congenital heart defect and was dying in an orphanage. I chose him. My husband at the time did not. Eventually, he gave me an ultimatum: return the child or leave. I paused not because I doubted the truth, but because the memory still burned.
I left my marriage.
I became a single mother because I refused to return a sick baby to a place where he might have died. Some viewers understood immediately. My God! She saved his life. He never told us any of this. Why would he hide this? Others were conflicted. Still doesn't explain why she cut him off. She didn't abandon him, abandoned her. I continued. 4 years, I worked overnight shifts, cleaned houses, waited tables, stitched clothing by hand just to afford his care. When he finally grew strong, I saved for college. I bought him a home with every spare dollar I earned. And when he got married, I thought my sacrifices would finally mean something. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. Instead, when I lost my job temporarily, told me I was dead weight. That I should scrub floors in an elderly facility to earn my keep. That I owed him my life. The chat burst into outrage, not at me, but at him. He said that. No way. That's insane. He told us she never helped at all. She bought him a house. He made himself look like a saint. What a snake. But I wasn't finished. I pressed a button to play an audio recording. The screen displayed a simple message, recorded with consent inside a monitored residence. Elias's voice filled the stream. She's old, she can cook and clean for him. Just convince your boss to let my mom move in. She'll take care of whatever he needs, she'll be grateful. And whatever she earns, I'll handle her paychecks. A hush fell. The implication was unmistakable. He wanted to place me in the home of a wealthy elderly man as a live-in servant, possibly worse, so he could control my income. Outrage exploded across the screen. He what?
ZS exploitation.
He basically tried to sell his own mother. I defended him for WEK Stam.
He's a manipulator.
My hands shook slightly, but I steadied them on the counter. Even after all this, I did not cut ties because of money, I continued. I cut ties because he tried to destroy my dignity. Then came the final blow, the one thing I had held back for years, the truth he feared most. He claimed I brought him into this world without his consent. But he does not know and refuses to accept what his birth parents did. He does not know how close he came to death before I found him. I held up an old photograph, a tiny infant connected to tubes, body so frail the blanket seemed too heavy for him. That child, I whispered, was the one I chose.
The one I protected. The one I loved.
Not because I owed him anything, but because I believed love meant something. The comment section overflowed with raw emotion. Ma'am, you're a saint. I'm crying. He used your kindness. He's weaponized victimhood. Cut him off permanently. He doesn't deserve your last name. I could finally breathe. But then came the moment that sealed everything. Someone wrote, "Why didn't he know he was adopted?" I answered honestly, because I didn't want him to feel unwanted twice. Silence fell in the chat, thousands of viewers speechless. And then, slowly, sympathy turned into fury, but not toward me. Within minutes, viewers rushed into Elias's livestream like a tidal wave. I saw comments flying in real time as they confronted him.
She saved your life. You lied about everything.
You used her money. You kicked her out? You tried to pimp her out to an old man? You owe her public apologies. You're scum. His face went pale on camera. He stuttered. He tried to deny, but every lie crumbled under the weight of documents, audio, dates, and irrefutable proof. When he couldn't defend himself, he finally snapped. So what if she adopted me? He screamed. I never asked her to. Maybe I would have been adopted by a better family. Maybe she ruined my life. The moment he uttered those words, everything ended. His viewers turned on him instantly. Sponsors withdrew. The platform banned his account for harassment and defamation. Within 24 hours, he was wiped clean from the digital world he had weaponized against me. My lawyer filed the lawsuit. The court ruled in my favor. He owed damages, fees, and restrictions so strict he could not speak my name again without risking jail time. And just like that, 30+ years of sacrifice, motherhood, struggle, and heartbreak concluded in a single undeniable truth. He had never loved me. He had only loved what I provided. Months passed. I reclaimed the house I had bought for him. His wife divorced him. He disappeared. Whispers said he fled to Canada, but I didn't care enough to verify. One day, over coffee with an old friend, I saw a viral clip circulating on Linear: disheveled man wandering the streets, muttering to himself, clutching moldy bread. The caption said he'd once been an influencer before losing everything. I recognized the shell of my son instantly. And in that moment, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not triumph. Not grief. Just a quiet, final release. Because my story was no longer about him. It was about me reclaiming the decades I had lost. I sold the villas for a profit, moved to a peaceful lakeside town, planted roses behind my porch, painted in quiet afternoons, and let music drift through my windows without judgment or interruption. And when people asked me, "Do you regret adopting Elias?" I always answered, "No. I only regret learning too late that kindness must have boundaries. Love must not cost your life. And a mother is still a human being, not a sacrifice waiting to be consumed." In the end, I did not lose a son. I reclaimed myself.